Hello there, kia ora. This week has been, wow, just terrible, to be honest. And the worst people in the country are celebrating the week. That shows you just how terrible it is. In this Omnibus edition, we go through everything from how media illiteracy allows media and personalities to spread racist bullcrap, and we finish the week with a couple of TERFs getting jobs as the Human Rights Commissioner and the Race Relations Commissioner. There are so many problems with what occurred this week, so try and take it all in your stride. It is sometimes really hard to keep up with everything that's going on, and make sure you're taking moments to look after yourself because it can feel so overwhelming all the time. If you get a chance, check out the rest of this video. There's, I think, 7 episodes this last week. Honestly, can't remember. It all just kind of blurs together. But there's a lot to get your head around, and it's really important that we do get our head around what's going on so that when we come to make decisions further on down the line, when we go out and vote, we vote for a better country. Because right now, the people who are laughing at it burning are the people who really shouldn't have that much of a say. But, well, their vote is just as powerful as yours, and the only way that we're going to be able to change it is to make sure we keep reminding people of the beneficiary bashing or the targeting of the disabled community that we saw this week, or even the fact that you get people like David Seymour saying that racism is bad and you shouldn't group people in certain ways, but it's okay to group poor people and give them orders on how to spend their money. Like, it was just one of those weeks. Hell, we didn't even get news stories covering the fact that the Prime Minister said that 88% of Māori 12-year-olds couldn't read. It was that kind of week. So, try and work your way through the Omnibus edition, but don't stress if you can't, because obviously there is a lot going on. So take a deep breath when you can, and if you want to watch the video, cool, and if you don't because it's too much, totally get it. Hello there, kia ora. Do you know how much influence some of our media has on political outcomes, or on the way that people feel about political outcomes? Media shaping policy and public opinion around policy actually isn't something new. It's been happening for as long as we've had mass media. And sometimes it's a good thing, like how media narrative changes in the 80s and 90s led to policy movements tackling climate change. Other times it perpetuates problems. And, well, there are 2 outlets in Aotearoa media which have recently shown just how that can happen. Both of them are owned by New Zealand Media and Entertainment, NZME. But the entire problem isn't just them pushing racist narratives. See, last week, we saw the front page of the Herald run a full-page cover advertisement from race baiters Hobson's Pledge. It claimed that Māori are after every bit of the foreshore in big scary pictures because, well, who needs subtlety? Clearly you don't understand what it is. It's grossly misleading, and it managed to upset a lot of people. This is specifically targeted as a campaign. It's aimed at the largest newspaper in the country in terms of readership, and that readership tends to be older and more conservative. This advert was actually designed to confirm a specific bias based on racist disinformation that Hobson's Pledge has been peddling for years. It was designed to add pressure to a decision that the government has already agreed to, which would limit the ability of iwi to make customary rights claims on the foreshore for cultural purposes. An agreement they made as part of the coalition deal with New Zealand First. Casey Costello, the New Zealand First MP, is also a board member of Hobson's Pledge. Within days of the announcement of the change, the Herald ran a paid PR campaign on behalf of an organisation known for spreading racism, which has an audience that is predominantly already voting for these current coalition parties. This was designed to make these changes much more palatable to them, many of whom are now questioning things like this government's approach to winding back progress for Māori. So this campaign was to scare them into believing that these changes are justifiable, because look what they're fighting against. At the other end of the problem, we've got News Talk ZB, the radio station where the richest arseholes tell middle-class Kiwis that poor brown people are the problem and cyclones aren't anything to worry about because you can still collect your kids up in their convertibles in a completely different part of the country. In April, the BSA actually found that Kate Hawkesby had misled audiences about the equity adjuster score being used in Auckland hospitals by claiming on air that this meant that Māori and Pacifica patients were being moved to the top of waiting lists because of their ethnicity. This actually followed reporting that morning by ZB political reporters Barry Soper and Jason Walls about the existence of the ethnicity element of the adjuster score, but they didn't make those same claims. Within hours of Hawkesby's comments, both National and ACT had launched campaigns to end the policy. Feedback that she had completely rage-farmed from her audience was pouring in, and social media feeds of politicians were being filled with demands from the same people that the Herald ad was aimed at, about how this needed to end. On August 1st this year, two things happened. A report was released from Te Whatu Ora, which actually found that while there were some small issues with the rollout of that adjuster policy, with some tweaking, it could actually work really well and then be rolled out around the rest of the country because ethnicity was such a small factor that was considered, well below things like clinical needs for the waiting list. And the government dropped the tool. That also happened on the same day. In fact, when they announced that they were dropping the tool, Dr. Shane Reti acknowledged the findings of the report and said, "Too late, we're already dropping it." So some media more than others seem comfortable using their platform to spread disinformation, particularly around race. I'm sure it's a complete coincidence that Newstalk ZB is the only station to have had 3 upheld BSA complaints about discrimination in the past 4 years, and is the mainstream station of choice for our government MPs. Well, the ones who refuse to go on reality check radio. But the problem isn't just the media. It's not necessarily the politicians as well who react to the rage that they create in their audience. It's actually the audience itself to a degree. You see, these are both examples of how a lack of media literacy can cause people to fall for opinion dressed as fact, in the case of Hawkesby, or advertising dressed as news in the case of the Herald. Yes, they were deliberately misled, but having the right tools to be able to interpret media can help minimize that impact. And if we don't find a way to fix it, then those misled and disinformed people will continue to be the voters who go out and choose the direction of the government. Hello there, kia ora. Yesterday, the government announced a raft of new changes that will directly impact those on benefits. Once again showing the National Party is the party of Bene bashing when they want to distract from being the party that enables racism or public complaints about their coalition partners. During the press conference, Social Development Minister Louise Upson said, "Our social welfare systems will always be a safety net that catches people if they fall," as they introduced a range of obligation failure punishments for people in need of that safety net. It's like having the fire department show up and saying they'll refuse to put out a burning house if they can't prove there's a smoke alarm inside, or an ambulance refusing to save someone's life if they can't prove they didn't go for a jog that morning for their health. These new punitive rules include extending the time a beneficiary has an obligation failure held against them by an extra 12 months, making it much more likely that they'll see sanctions hit their benefits, sanction levels which are already at record highs. Forcing job seekers to reapply every 6 months, adding to the workload of MSD staff to ensure files are being checked constantly, making it mandatory that all work-ready beneficiaries have job seeker profiles before they get any help in any way. A limit on the way that beneficiaries are actually allowed to spend money, with a new money management sanction that can only be used on a limited range of essential products and services. Because they seem to think that anyone on a benefit isn't smart or responsible enough to spend money in a way that will see their bills get paid. And a new community work experience sanction that requires beneficiaries to build skills and confidence to help them get a job. Neither of which are much use when there are not enough jobs. Of course, we are starting to see massive numbers of unemployed after the economy was tanked in the name of controlling inflation, and massive layoffs in sectors like the public service sector and the construction sector because of specific government policies. When that happens, the number of people needing that safety net inevitably go up. And instead of making sure that safety net is fit for purpose, this government once again rolls out the PR lines that make anyone on a benefit look like an arsehole gaming the system. But the reality is, these actions from the government are not only counterproductive, we're already seeing exactly what experts keep trying to tell them we would see as a result of the tough on beneficiary stance that the government has taken. For one thing, benefit sanctions do nothing to encourage people to find work, especially if there's limited work available. But experts have long shown that research proves that tougher stances towards people on benefits directly correlates to an increase in crime. Internal police data this month revealed retail crime is up 17% in the first 5 months of this year compared to last year. That there have been 66 more cases of acts intended to cause injury and 17 more cases of sexual assault over the same period. And the government response has been to lowball police officer pay offers, driving them overseas, telling gangs that they can't wear patches in public, and trying to sneak through gun law changes that the police have called for the resignation of a minister over, when simply not treating beneficiaries like something they found on the bottom of their shoes would wield so much better results. But hey, why start listening to experts now when everyone knows National is playing its greatest hits, like it always does when it wants a quick boost in the polls or to distract you from what other terrible things they're doing at the time? Hello there, kia ora. Some things don't always age well, like special effects from early 90s films, with the possible exception of Jurassic Park. Or this tweet from Act saying that you're the best person to make decisions for yourself, before they started celebrating the fact that they were telling beneficiaries what decisions that they could make. Or Christopher Luxon telling cancer patients to go out and work before not funding cancer meds in the budget. Or Christopher Luxon's comments that they don't do bottom feeders out for a free ride, before he moved into a new mansion this week that taxpayers paid for, that he lives in rent-free after claiming $52,000 in accommodation supplements for a property he already owns outright. Oh, and he made benefit obligations even more cruel than they were. Or when Nicola Willis and Christopher Luxon said we'd be getting $250 a week in tax cuts. Or when he said that we'd get to keep the first home buyers grants. Or that he'd have a laser focus on the cost of living. The point here is that sometimes things don't age well, and it looks like our planned live stream for Friday is actually one of those things, but in a really different way. You see, we'd planned to go live at 8 p.m. We've got an amazing interview with Labour's Shannon Halbert and Carmel Sepuloni already lined up, and we're doing a live chat with disability advocate Nick Ruane. Hell, I even had some jokes prepared like, it's not a surprise that the French left us off their world map in the Olympics closing ceremony. There's nothing more French than ignoring people who refuse to speak anything other than English. We've been given a heads up, though, about something on Thursday, which means that we need to be, well, a little bit flexible with what we do on Friday. We want to give the stream a little bit more time so that we can cover the topic a lot more specifically, which is slightly problematic right now because we can't talk about it until it's all officially announced. Needless to say, though, that this is going to be an area that we were planning to cover already, and it will undoubtedly be regressive for those impacted and hurt a lot of people. So now we're going to start half an hour earlier to make sure we get everything covered by 9 p.m. So from 7:30 Friday, you can join Blake and I for a live stream on Facebook and YouTube as we talk about this upcoming announcement and learn more about Labour's plans to get re-elected, why MP Shannon Halbert is disappointed in the police minister over Brian Tamaki, and their plan to tackle what's happening with Māori wards around the country. So make sure you tune in. It's completely free. Come and join the conversation. It'll be fantastic to see you there. The links are all in the bio. So mā te wā and hei te paraire. Hello there, kia ora. You probably saw yesterday a lot of noise about the OCR, the official cash rate, and a lot of will they, won't they talk about the rate changes. It's kind of like the Ross and Rachel of the economics world. And it didn't take long after a change was announced for the government, particularly the Prime Minister, to claim credit. And we all know what that means by now, don't we? Yeah, let me try and explain this in a high-level way, because honestly, economics does my head in so much just writing the script for today gave me a headache. So the OCR and the decisions on it are not simple products. They are more complicated than the plot of Being John Malkovich. Basically, the OCR is the interest rate that banks borrow money from the Reserve Bank Act. That impacts how much banks set interest rates on loans, and everybody gets impacted by that. Your home loan, for example, or your business loan. But then there's also things like the money borrowed by councils to pay for infrastructure. Operational costs for bank services impact things like how much a plumber's going to charge you. It impacts your rates bill, which impacts rents. It impacts operational costs, which will hit you at the pump or the supermarket. The more the Reserve Bank charges, the more it costs everyone down the line, so we spend less, which shrinks the economy, which leads to businesses having to stabilize prices of things you buy, which sets the rate of what we call domestic inflation. But there's also other factors like imported inflation, the cost of things that are bought into the country. The more that costs, the more we pay, and when supply chains are limited, that increases costs. And imported inflation has been the big driver since the start of the pandemic and the war in the Ukraine. We saw supply chains break down, the costs of importing increased, especially on core items like oil-based products. And as those prices increase, spending goes up, which increases inflation. So the OCR is a tool that the Reserve Bank used to limit how much we have to spend to get inflation under control. It's why making thousands of people unemployed is a tool to stop inflation, because people not earning means people not spending. It's the definition of trickle-down economics. Now, one of the markers the Reserve Bank used to make their call yesterday was the stability of those core market products like the price of oil imports. In fact, imported inflation levels are pretty comparable now to where they were before the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. However, domestic inflation is a different story. Actions this government has undertaken has stopped inflation dropping as fast as it should have. Increased costs for councils, for example, as they reintegrate water infrastructure costs, or put money aside for a completely pointless racist Māori ward referenda. For example, those mean that people spend more money on rates and rents. The increased costs of power and ongoing costs like transport registrations, the increased sales of petrol-based vehicles after the cancellation of the clean car discount and road user charge increases, which means service providers and businesses have to keep their prices up to cover their costs. But because supply chains are pretty much back to pre-pandemic levels and supply is much more consistent, that's one of the biggest drivers for the drop in inflation, which means the Reserve Bank can loosen its grip a little and charge banks a little less. And all this was actually kind of planned a few years ago. You see, the OCR was set at 5.5 a couple of years back, and the analytics showed that between 2024 and 2025 we'd be at about the point that we are now in terms of inflation rates. It's pretty much returning to normal without the help of the government, but slowed down because of it slightly. But the Prime Minister wants to take credit, and it's fair to say he did actually have a small hand in this. By creating economic policies that have both seen increased domestic spending and massive layoffs across industries, forcing people onto benefits and re-indexing those benefits so beneficiaries have less spending power, that is one element that has helped the Reserve Bank make its decision to lower the rate, since factoring in unemployment levels is no longer something they're allowed to do after this government reversed that mandate when they came into power. The Prime Minister sacrificed thousands of jobs, which impacts how fast wages grow and forced people to spend more money, which factor into yesterday's decision. And it should also probably be pointed out that this is a decision that'll take at least 6 months to a year to actually see any major impact on the economy, other than knowing that our GDP is going to drop substantially, so we're looking at an ongoing recession. Hello there, kia ora. Look, I'm going to keep this one nice and short because it's been a manic day. It's 10:40 on Thursday night when I'm recording this, and I still have to edit it and subtitles and all that kind of stuff before I put it out. Long day. I mean, there was all sorts of crazy that happened today, like the Prime Minister's weird trip to Australia. It seems he's entitled to those kind of entitlements, but, well, beneficiaries are entitled to be more, well, obligated to things. It's a weird dichotomy. There was Nicole McKee admitting that, she decided that she didn't want to have the police association have to give feedback on gun law reforms, but she's quite happy to talk to gun lobby groups after working with organisations that are chaired on by the NRA. Not a conflict of interest in any shape, way or form there. There was Mark Mitchell, the police minister, claiming once again that the New Zealand Defence Force did say that they would be on the front lines when it comes to those children's boot camps that the government's setting up, and not being able to prove it yet again. There was the fact that one of the kids actually left the boot camp because I don't know, reasons, I guess. I don't blame them whatsoever. And then there was the announcement that Te Whatu Ora was going to be getting rid of 263 positions in their commissioning agency. And the commissioning agency is the part of the organisation that actually goes out and works with those sector providers in the health industry that work in communities and deal with a whole bunch of frontline issues when they crop up. They're getting rid of the people who organise all of that. And so the people in that field, those ones that work for those service providers, are starting to freak out a little bit. What is the health sector shaping up to be if they don't have help from people in the back room, as this National Party likes to put it? Because when it comes to the health sector, there is no difference between the back room and the front room. All of it is needed to make sure the system works efficiently, which it clearly isn't. It's a great way to say thanks to the people that were the front line when it came to things like COVID testing and vaccination rollouts, isn't it? And then, of course, there was the big issues around Whaikaha that were announced yesterday morning. They really, really seem to love to put Louise Upson up to these kind of things because, well, she smiles her way through it all. Yeah. Anyway, these are all big, super complicated issues, and I'm not an expert on any of them, and it's getting late. So what I am going to do is suggest you do something a little different tonight. 7:30 tonight on my YouTube and Facebook page, we're going to do a live stream. We're calling it Behind the Walls of Parliament, and it's going to be, well, an interesting show. The first bit of the show is going to be put aside to a panel discussion with experts from the disability sector. We've got Nick Ruane, who's a disability advocate, and we've got Dr. Rebecca Graham. She's a disability advocate who works in areas like poverty and how government policy actually impacts people in ways that you might not necessarily know. They are both absolutely brilliant and passionate about what happened with Whaikaha yesterday, so it's going to be a really interesting discussion. Then I'm going to give you an update on some of the crazy news that's happened during the week, and that will be followed up by an interview that we've pre-recorded with Carmel Sepuloni and Shannon Halbert from the Labour Party. So 7:30 tonight on YouTube and Facebook. So you can find the links for that in my bio. And if you're a paid subscription member for the YouTube page, you'll be able to get that pre-recorded interview with Carmel and Shannon from about 7 o'clock at night if you want to see it early, or I don't know, go to bed early so you don't have to worry about the last bit of that live stream. Yeah. So yeah, go and follow those if you don't already. And I will catch you guys all a little bit later tonight, hopefully. Come along, enjoy the show. It'll be really kind of fascinating to sit down and watch. Hello there, kia ora. Yesterday, the Waitangi Tribunal released its interim findings on David Seymour's Treaty Principles Bill. And if they weren't a judiciary body that has to be all formal and professional, it would have been a much shorter version that pretty much read what the actual fuck this is. Fuck this shit. You see, they noted that by engaging with this policy, our Prime Minister, on behalf of the Crown, who told us he was an expert negotiator before collapsing faster than a house of cards trying to hold up an anvil when it came to setting up his coalition, is sanctioning a process that will take away Indigenous entitlements and a breach of the duty the Crown has to act in good faith and reasonably as a Te Tiriti partner. They actually made 4 recommendations. The first, well, that was to take the bill and
cast it into the fire! Destroy it!
That the Crown should put together a Māori Crown's Relations Committee to oversee Te Tiriti policies that the Crown proposes. That the review policy should be put on hold so that there can be some actual collaboration instead of telling Māori that they've collaborated because David Seymour thinks talking to himself in the mirror is the same thing as engaging Māori on issues. And that the Crown should consider ways to undo the damage it's caused in Māori-Crown relations over the past 10 months. In response, Seymour said he actually didn't hate the report despite the criticism, calling it an important step in the national conversation he keeps saying he wants, before using it as an excuse to do the whole sales pitch that he has for the bill with all of the classic hits like, "Are we a modern democracy? Are these the fundamentals of democracy?" And many of the worst events in history came from treating humans based on their membership of certain groups. By the way, the poor's on benefits have to be told how to spend their money, and those poor people should miss out on any help if they have too many children. And the Prime Minister said, "Sorry, I can't hear you. Look at me, I'm in Australia. Look, they have koalas." And infrastructure being built is over here. We should totally be bipartisan on infrastructure at home, but only the infrastructure I think we should have. After all, we did cancel things like light rail to Auckland CBD, the Harbour Bridge crossing, work on new dam projects, and ferry upgrades. Oh, look, a kangaroo! The fact is that sadly, the Waitangi Tribunal can make as many well-reasoned, well-researched, well-articulated observations and claims that it wants. This government will not listen to expert advice if it goes against what they feel and the vibes they get, or if it'll upset any of their coalition partners in any way. They've shown this time and again, time after time. But who needs experts when you live in a world where you get to ignore reality and lord it over the rest of us every day? Hello there, kia ora. There's an old adage in news that if you have to deliver bad news, dump it on a Friday. It's actually called the Friday dump, and this government is getting really good at it because of how often they tend to deliver shitty news or make a stupid gaffe on a Friday. And this Friday was no exception. What should have been actually a pretty low-key announcement, the naming of the new Human Rights and Race Relations Commissioners, was another example of a Friday dump. The new Human Rights Commissioner is a long-time advocate for the gay community, who doesn't believe trans people should be treated like everyone else. And the new Race Relations Commissioner raised funds for the alt-right and white nationalists Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux to come to New Zealand, use Auckland Council venues to tell people that Muslims are coming to replace them in absolutely everything. It's actually called the Great Replacement Theory. Yeah, she decided she wanted to hear what they had to say. She doesn't believe in systemic racism, also doesn't believe that trans people should be treated like people. She's spoken at things like Posey Parker's rally and was a founding member of the Free Speech Union. Now look, obviously to most people who aren't absolutely awful, these are not the sort of people you'd want in those roles. They clearly bring to the table preconceived notions that include harmful beliefs against specific communities, which is not something that those commissions are supposed to do. So Justice Minister Paul Goldsmith, who appoints these roles, released the news on Friday afternoon. Added into the mix, though, was a great example of the sort of gaffe that we've come to expect from our Prime Minister, claiming that 88% of 12-year-old Māori are illiterate.
What we're doing with respect to mathematics, when you have 88% of Māori kids at year 8 unable to read, those are the things and the conversations that we've been getting into.
Which you mentioned during a stand-up with the press in Australia that got literally no pushback from our media. It's an unqualified comment where there's no data to back it up because all the data contradicts it. And it's the sort of thing that gets jumped on and amplified by those wanting to revel in their racism. In the pre-social media days, the Friday dump was something that would kind of lead to a story dying a quiet death because newsrooms run on a skeleton staff over the weekend. And much of the content for things like newspapers that was released over the weekend was pre-made filler, like longer investigation pieces, classified ads, in-depth sports recaps from the week, and entertainment news. Them being able to investigate further was really difficult because a lot of the people involved just don't work weekends. Last week, the Friday dump included massive increases in visa costs to immigration, the admission that the construction sector is the worst it's seen since the mid-80s. The week before that, it was the conclusion of the response to the March 15 Royal Commission recommendations where the government chose to drop the last of them. They've included over the last couple of months their PR piss take, that's the pothole repair fund being rolled out, the extension of the New Zealand Defence Force's service in the Red Sea, Simeon Brown's war on road cones, and his binning of the Future for Local Government report. But there is actually a way that it can be combated thanks to how we've changed the way that we connect and communicate since, about 20 years ago. With the interconnection social media provides, news doesn't have to stay limited to what gets published on specific days. So something as simple as liking a news story or sharing posts helps feed the algorithms that gets the news dumped on the doldrums on the Friday cycle out to far more people with exponential reach. By using the tools we have at our fingertips, we can make sure that the unpopular news items, like having a couple of anti-trans people in charge of commissions meant to be politically neutral, get seen by as many people as possible. Cool, thanks for watching this week's Omnibus edition. I know it's pretty intense and it feels like it's getting more and more intense every week when you know that the worst people in the country are the ones out there celebrating what they consider wins that are going to hurt so many people. But that's just what it is. Take note of it, remember it, and when it comes to vote, remember you can make the change that needs to be made. And until then, I will catch you guys later. Please look after yourself and I will talk to you later.